At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position as this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Okay. Not exactly the world's answer to greatness, is it? That's typically not what we think of as greatness. What do you think are the characteristics of the child that you think that Jesus was wanting to drive home that allow you to become the greatest? Humility. Okay. Trust.
Came over here just because you're asking.
But so humility, trust. Your relationship as a child, your relationship to the Father is a lot different than it is as you grow older, isn't it? The fact that you trust your father, the fact that you think you have a 5-year-old boy usually has no trouble thinking that their father's the greatest person in the world. But by the time they're 14, they kind of don't think that anymore. So those are definitely good characteristics.
What about encouragement?
Encouragement. So children are always looking for the good in things, typically, right?
Yeah.
I think that is very definitely a good characteristic. Yes.
Could be innocence of someone who's
Okay.
living a pure life.
Innocence.
Kind of goes along with trust, but children have a lot of faith.
Right. Should have faith. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think those are all very good traits there. And how are those things different? So we typically will think of greatness in terms of accomplishment or what we have done. That is how we would be shown to be great. Why is that? Why do we have a term? Why do we look at that more? What is the flaw?
You're asking why?
Yeah. Yes.
It's kind of our system is kind of set up and accomplishing things and doing things, reaching certain levels of performance.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that Christ definitely puts that aside. That you do not worry about your worldly accomplishments. Worry about more who you are being rather than what you are doing. It's interesting that there's an early church tradition that says that this child was actually Ignatius of Antioch, who was an early church father, the child that Jesus brought him. I don't think there's any real concrete evidence of that, but I thought that was interesting. All right, I'll go ahead and read this next section too here. "And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. Some things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come." Okay. So, a little bit of pressure here. As someone who is currently teaching, that I definitely read this with some, pay attention to it. that it is a incredible responsibility to be, in a position where you might be leading someone astray. Yes, I want to talk a little bit about what receiving the child means. So receiving the child, which was the first part of that passage. What all do you think is involved in receiving the child?
Nurturing.
Okay, nurturing. Okay, being able to be able to bring the child in and allow the child to develop. Very good.
Love.
Love. Okay. Want the child to be able to live his best life, live his or her best life. All right. I think the strong warning not only stresses the importance of the teaching, obviously, but it also stresses the importance of the child, does it not? It also, stresses how important it is for those that, for who the teacher is teaching. And it shows what, God's love and God's plan is for them in a very strong way that, that this is such an important act. All right, let's,
Hey, Scott?
yes.
I just happenstance, but I saw a picture recently on the internet of a millstone.
Okay, uh-huh.
And I always thought, it's like this little bitty thing. These things are huge. I mean, it was bigger than that TV screen, and made out of stone. And if you can imagine having that tied to your neck, I was blown away by how big that thing was. It was huge.
It's, I know I thought of, all the phrases Joey always have in gangster movies, that's the way the gangsters always remove the people,
Well, and that was one of the purposes, it said, one of the purposes of millstones was that's how they got rid of the evildoers, the robbers and stuff. They would throw them in the lake with that on.
Throw them in the lake, and that would do the trick. I mean, it wouldn't be, they weren't going to be able to swim with that over. So that would, yes, millstone is a very, very, very large stone. Obviously, what these were used for was to, turn wheat into flour, basically, and things like that. And if you're doing that entirely by hand, you're going to have something very heavy to actually be doing the milling.
Here.
All right. Let someone else read this. Can someone read verses 12 through 14 for me?
What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish.
Okay, so continuing on this theme of how precious each individual is, and of course this drives home that that God is trying to drive home that God is loving every one of us by this image of the way the shepherds would react to a single being able to rescue a single sheep. In Luke, of course, this parable is with two other parables that. One is lost coin, and the third one is the prodigal son. In the book, these three parables are right together in the book of Luke. And of course, the prodigal son goes into a lot of detail about exactly how that father's love works. No matter how far the son goes away, when the son is returned, it is a time of great rejoicing. But I do think this is a very powerful little parable. I mean, I think that it is, and obviously there is a lesson to us that that's how we should react. We should not just say, well, thank goodness 99 of us made it. That we should have, the desire for the one to be rescued, and should also be rejoicing that they're that the sheep saved. Anybody else have any particular thoughts about this? All right.
I think it speaks to the shepherd in that you got 100 sheep. I thought they would kill them all apart. He knows the one that's missing.
Right. Yeah, that's another very good point. That the shepherd knows his sheep well enough that he can tell, that one's missing.
They all look like the same.
That's right.
They
That's right.
smell the same too.
So why did you skip verse 10?
Okay, what was verse 10? And I probably just made a choice because I do want to get through chapter 20 today. So let me see if I can remember what I did, because I didn't. Most of the choices I'm thinking on skipping is simply just, okay, I've got some time, I got to get some time out of this. I think I cut 8 slides out of this yesterday and today, to try to trim some time. So, okay, so see that you do not despise the little ones. For I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is who's in heaven. So this is a little bit deeper. So what is meant by the angels there? Yeah. So you're wanting me to get into a real good theological discussion there. That is obviously sort of the, that's one of the reasons that we, came up with the, why the whole guardian angel, concept kind of, came out of that verse. And, so what exactly is that meaning? That each one of the children have their own little angel is almost what that's implying. And I know I could view that as more of a metaphor rather than something literal. But that is, but that's obviously, some people who take that very literally, that's, how they come with the concept that every one of us has an angel that is sort of, interceding, or not necessarily interceding. We know that Christ is our intercessor, but is sort of, responsible. We all have our little Clarence. There's another movie reference for you there.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Hopefully most of ours are first class or in the second class. All right. Okay, so here's kind of a tough passage. Can someone read verses 15 through 18?
And if your brother sins, go and reprove him in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take 1 or 2 more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax gatherer. Truly I say to you, whatever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven.
Okay, so there's a lot of little things in this passage. One thing that's a little bit interesting is that it goes ahead and makes a reference to the church here. One of the reasons why that's interesting is it would be kind of weird for Jesus to be talking about the church at this point, because of the fact that the church, really doesn't exist yet, and the fact that this is very much, sort of a discussion of of almost what you might call church policy, you know, in a sense. So that's that's a little bit interesting in the fact that he goes ahead and uses that term here. So first of all, the 2 steps of reconciliation that are mentioned there, I think are interesting. Yes.
Scott, do you think this coincides with the previous, what we've been talking about, the lost sheep? And so here's an example of how you go about retrieving.
Yes, I do think looking at this in the context of the previous verses is very valuable here. You know, where you have, okay, we've just had the lost sheep. We've just talked about how wonderful it would be to be able to bring the lost sheep back into the fold. We've just talked about that. And so here we're going to talk about a strategy, in a sense, to do that. Okay, there's
Also, Scott, the word church is ecclesia in Greek, and that just means a gathering of people or a congregation.
Okay, so I didn't catch that.
So it wouldn't necessarily be referring to the church coming in the future. But
okay, so that's
they can apply that even in their.
They can apply that. Okay, all right. I did wrong. Okay, very good, very good. So there's 2 steps of reconciliation here. You go to the person individually, and then you go to the person with a group. Notice, always one thing that comes to mind when I read this particular passage is it doesn't say go to the elders and grumble about them, which is typically what happens a lot, isn't it? That's not given as the strategy, but I think it's powerful because you're put in the position of reconciliation. If you feel that there's the wrong, you are the onus is put on you to try to do what you can to do this right. You first do it yourself, which probably is going to have the best chance of impact, right? I mean, if they see that your heart is wanting the reconciliation, then they're probably more likely, even if they, you can think of all kinds of different types of disputes here, from everything from just anger with each other to someone, living a life that clearly seems to be in sin. It could be all kinds of different little scenarios here. But certainly, if I'm going out of my comfort zone to attempt to bring you back, that is going to have, some impact, some, major impact. And then if I, feel the need to bring then I go up to bring a couple other people with me. Notice that you're still going in that scenario. Notice when Christ outlines that you're still with the 2 people. It doesn't say go find 2 other people and send them. It says that you still go with them. I think there's in a sense you have to show that you want to have the shepherds rejoicing of bringing them back. That's I think that that we talked about in previous verses. Now, if it fails, it has this. Before we go into that clause, does anybody have any comments about that? About the steps of reconciliation? So, if it fails, it mentions that the person should be considered as a tax collector or Gentile. Now, at first that sort of seems harsh, but we've already had Jesus talk about tax collectors and Gentiles a lot. Okay, what did Christ think about tax collectors and Gentiles?
They should follow me.
Well, he wants them to follow them, but he's not saying that completely exclusive at this point. Okay, that is, I think some people have always said, okay, well that means I cast them out. Well, that's not what Jesus did with tax collectors or Gentiles. You know, that's not the way that's not the way he viewed them.
They were the sick that needed the doctor.
Right, they were the sick that needed the doctor, right. So, but he's kind of saying, I do think what he's saying is, okay, your part is done. Okay, these people, if they, you know, we can, it may be possible these many people be brought in, but if they are going to be on the outside, then let them be on the outside. I don't think he is trying to say, shun them or you know, he's just trying to say, you've done your two pieces of this. You know, you may now move on. You know, maybe someone else will be in a position to bring them, to reconcile them, and they will be fully reconciled if that's the case. But you know, you've done what you can do, and at this point, you move on. I think is almost more what Christ is saying with this.
I think you have to be cautious in that situation, not to shut them down.
Right.
But you know, it's over time. You have friends that come and friends that go, and if you ran across somebody from 10 years ago tomorrow, you would still be friendly with them.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the point. Is like you're saying, move on, but don't shut them down. Don't cut them. You know, in any way. Be positive. Say, hey, you know, in this point, maybe we need to agree to disagree, but I still respect you as a person, and you're still my friend. But you know, maybe we'll just talk about something else next time.
Right. Yeah, I think it is more along those types of lines, as far as that. You know, you've done what you can do, you know, that may mean they might slide outside of your circle. They may mean that they may, you know. But again, it's not to cast them out. It's not all, because again, I think the point is Christ didn't cast out tax collectors or Gentiles themselves. That's not what I wanted to say here. The fourth phrase here, bound and loosed in heaven. This is the second time we've had this expression come up in Matthew. That what you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. What you loose on earth, you will loose in heaven. Some people have, I think, misinterpreted this passage to say that says that gives the church the right, the ability to forgive sins themselves. I think some people have extrapolated this to that level, and I do not think that is at all what Christ is intending to apply here. But I do think what Christ is intending to apply here is this is eternal stuff. And what I mean by that is what is going on here is very much the purpose of the kingdom of heaven. The way you're dealing with these interpersonal relations, you know, that is mirroring what you will, you know, what, you know, the relationships in heaven. I mean, I think Christ is trying to really drive home that this is the important facets of your relationships. Now, some people, when you hear a statement like that, some people will struggle with. I'd definitely be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I think sometimes we have a lot of pictures of what heaven's going to look like. You know, we think about, you know, what James just said. You know, we've got this person that we disagree. I assume when we get in heaven, we'll see this person, or in some situations, the person may fall. You know, it may be a more serious situation, but there will be people in heaven that we disagree with on earth, right? I would assume that would be the case, and we're going to find out that some of the things we disagreed about probably were significant, and one of us was dead wrong about it. You know, I think we will find that in heaven. You know that. Now, I do think it's kind of interesting. Now, one thing I certainly do feel personally about heaven is that our most important relationship is our relationship with the Father, and that will shadow those things. But I am kind of curious as to how interactions, like that will work. When we realize, if I was the one that was completely wrong about something, how that will, sort of manifest itself. I mean, I think I'm not worried about not being forgiven, but I'm just worried about how our personality, in a sense, will work in that scenario. I think that's a strong thing. But I do think what is meant by the bound on earth and bound in heaven, loosed on earth, loosed in heaven, is that these relationships are kingdom relationships, as far as that they are mimicking what should be important to you. That's the eternal things that should be important to you. That's a lot of deep stuff. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay. All right.
I don't think we have thoughts in heaven like we might have here. I don't think you in heaven think that guy's lucky to be here.
Yeah, right. I think you're right. And the weird thing is I bet there'll be people that are in heaven that on earth we thought that about it. On earth we thought, I think there'll probably be at least one person that all of us will probably, run into and say, that's surprising. But I do think you're right. I think our focus will be totally different there. But I think that, that's why I was being a little bit facetious there, because I think you're right, Hollis. We actually won't think like that in heaven, but we do think like that here. And I think there'll be those people that there'll be somebody that if you had asked us today, we think, no, I didn't know that person was a Christian. I didn't see any evidence that person was a Christian. All right. So this is one of the most powerful passages in the Bible, and I don't think we really use this one enough. So someone read verses 19 and 20 for me here.
Again, truly I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For wherever 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them.
Okay, this is a great promise, isn't it? And I think both of these clauses here, the fact that, that we can pray in community and have, God answer it, and it says pretty powerfully, that if we agree, that He'll agree too. We can go a little bit deeper on that, definitely. And then also this power of presence that we will say a lot. I think that the verse 20 there we quote a lot. We will definitely quote quite frequently that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. We love quoting that verse. But I'm curious as to how much we really believe it and how much we apply it. That implies that God is in our presence right now, right? We are gathered in His name, and I'm very grateful for that.
I think it's used a lot for a crutch to skip services.
Good. Well,
truth be known, but there's also situations, and my family is one of them, where you can't always be here for one reason or another, and the implication is when we invoke that verse, that means we're still going to spend time with God if we're not in presence of the congregation. The reality is, are you? If you don't come corporately to worship here, and you say, well, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'll be there. Well, okay. Are you in His name, or are you doing something else?
Well, and I think the latter part is an important part of that, certainly, is that do we gather in, when we gather with our other Christians, do we gather in His name as often as we should? And that's I know my wife's father once, I never really talked to him about the details of this study, but he once told me that they had a Bible study at the church that they all grew up in Knoxville about communion, and they really wanted to study communion and study, we have the tradition of, we always take it on the first Sunday of the week, and at the end of the study, they actually came to the conclusion, we probably ought to take communion every single time we gather together. That's almost the conclusion they came to. That if we're since we're gathering together in our name, we should always be remembering that. Certainly on Sunday when we're gathering together at church, we should be remembering that. But we should almost always be taking communion. Anytime that we have a Bible study on Tuesday nights over at our house, perhaps we should be taking communion. That was and not in a legalistic. It was not at all attempting to be legalistic at all, and that is, in fact, it's trying to be exactly the opposite. It's trying to be, let's honor the fact that we are inviting God into our presence, into our midst, and use that as the power to power this gathering here.
This would have a greater meaning for people that live in areas where there are no congregations. And we've all heard about different people being baptized in Afghanistan or Iran. And, they, fear of their life, they don't publicly meet together. But when they can get together with 2 or 3, it's very meaningful. The Lord's Supper has great meaning for those folks. And maybe that was true, at least in the first part of Christianity in the Roman Empire.
Right, certainly. I mean, you look at church a lot differently when it is illegal for you to go to church. I'm not saying you shouldn't go. I'm not trying to dissuade that, but I mean, what is church has to be looked at differently if it's illegal for you to go to church. Obviously.
And I think it's a great thing now when you're a shut-in. There's a lot of people I see every Sunday online that are most likely by themselves.
Right.
And so they can be participants in the name of God because we're streaming services to them now. So it broadens the horizon for those that for whatever reason can't be here. I mean, talking about Afghanistan and other countries where it's illegal, certainly the government can track an IP address and find out where you are, but I'd take that risk.
Yeah. I mean, it does give an option. And again, I think as you were saying, Pop, I think that I mean, do y'all know the symbol, how the fish symbol got started? Have y'all heard that story? That was in the first century. That would be how Christians would identify themselves to each other, as they would make half of a fish, like in the sand or something, and then if you were a Christian, you would complete the other half. That way, you could meet. You could identify a person as Christian, and okay, this person is now safe for me to talk to about Christian things. And that was one reason why the fish became a symbol in the early church.
So when you said draw halfway, what do you mean?
Like you would draw like that, and the person would do like that.
Put your foot in the sand, draw it with your big toe.
Yeah. And so that way it was like a secret symbol for Christians to identify themselves to each other. When they were under times of persecution, they could, they would know, okay, this is a fellow follower. All right. Okay, I still want to do this though. All right, I'll go ahead and read this one because it's long, and I'll just try to read through it real quick, and we'll talk about it. So this very, very famous parable of Jesus is here. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into the prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he paid back all that he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. All right. How many times do you forgive? Is the question that Peter asks. Now, like a lot of things, I think the first thing you can kind of say on this, like a lot of things when Jesus is posed a question, it's almost posed in a way that's looking for some sort of boundary. That's like, okay, if I do this, I'm good. And Jesus, as we know, is very consistent in, if you're looking at it that way, you're probably not looking at it right. And so, Peter says 7. I know I did not re-look at this, and I was trying to remember what the scribes would say 3 because of something Amos said, and it's something that's in the book of Amos, and I did not write down the verses in the book of Amos, and I'm trying to remember that now. But Amos has something that hints at 3, and so the scribes were saying, well, if we go to 7, we've got that covered. And so that's kind of what Peter is referring to.
Yeah, Amos said repeatedly for 3 transgressions.
That's right. Right. Yes. Thank you. Sorry, my mind just went completely blank there. Yes. So frequently in the book of Amos, he's listing kings that are listing kingdoms that are sinning, and Israel sins, and he will use that pattern that Bob is referring to a lot, where Amos will say that 3 times you have transgressed, and so it's almost like the 4th is the breaking point. It's almost the way the poetic language of Amos reads. If you read Amos, it's like the 4th is the breaking point. And thank you. I don't know why my went completely blank there, and so the scribes, basically said, okay, well that means that's the rule. That's what we have to do. Forgive 3 times, and then they do it the 4th time. We're done. We don't have to do it anymore. And so Peter, by saying 7, Peter's saying, well, I'll bump that up 4. I'll bump that. So surely that'll be enough. Maybe 3's not enough, but surely 7 is. And so Jesus comes back and says, 70 times 7, and he's not saying that 490 is now enough. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying, again, you're missing the point. Of forgiveness here. And so he does then teach this parable. I think this very good parable to drive the point home. So, so there's several things about the parable. One, the money, which is not important, but if you look in today's dollars, it was like the one servant owed about $10 million, the other one owed, less than 10,000, somewhere between 5 and 10,000. So totally different, just completely on different levels of what the money is. And so one of the reactions you would have, if I suddenly had $10 million I didn't think I had yesterday, $10,000 shouldn't be that stressful to me, right? And that's what he was forgiven a $10 million debt. So all of a sudden he had a $10 million windfall. So, and I mentioned denarii is sometimes, the silver pieces is sometimes translated denarii, which is, denarii is a technical term for a day's wage, that wins, and that'll come up in a parable in the next chapter too, but that is, basically what a regular laborer would make in a day is what a denarii is. So kind of almost what you might think of as sort of minimum wage in our society. It would just be just kind of a bare existence amount of money that you would get for a day's work. So what does this tell us about how forgiveness should work? What does this parable tell us about how forgiveness should work?
We should realize how much we've been forgiven.
Right, that's the first thing.
God forgives us.
That's the first thing I think.
We'll always be willing to
Yes.
forgive.
Yes, we should always be willing to forgive because we've been forgiven a debt that there's no way we could possibly end up repaying. There is no way we could cover that debt. And I think that's certainly the first thing that Christ is driving home there is that you have been forgiven. You should not be worried about not forgiving others. Because of the forgiveness you've been given. This is a common theme throughout the entire New Testament that forgive to be forgiven. And forgive because you are forgiven. It's worded in two different ways. Two different orders, but those two ideas that forgive because you are forgiven.
It's a very serious offense to hold a grudge all of your life.
Yes, it is. And I agree with that.
Almost doomed
Yeah.
to that kind of attitude.
And I think the point that's driving home is I think God is trying to say, aren't you glad I'm not like you in this regard? Aren't you? The point he's trying to say, aren't you glad? You should have been glad. That you don't want to be like that. The servant that I forgave the 100 talents for, because he was given a forgiveness that should have been able to, in a sense, set his life free. And his life certainly wasn't free. If you had a $10 million debt over your head, you would be trapped by that. And so he was, and that's the situation we're in. We had a debt that should have cost us everything, and it's been completely and totally forgiven and cost us nothing. So we should definitely have the ability to forgive others.
Scott, there's another part of this. He says you should forgive your brother from your heart.
Yes.
Shouldn't forgive because we have to.
Right.
Because
Very good point.
Judges,
Right.
we should do it because that's now our nature, our attitude.
Right. It should almost be a joyful act of worship, in a sense. That we should, since I have been forgiven, I have no trouble forgiving you. No, it is not a burden. Yes.
He also reminds us of that in the Lord's Prayer, for us to recall and remember.
Yes. Certainly. Forgive us because we have been forgiven. That is certainly, it is very important. Yes. I think this is very consistent teaching, I think, throughout the New Testament. All right, we'll do one more slide and then we'll stop. Oh, we can't do this. There's no way we can do this one. 1 minute.
She's not in the chair. She's
Still not in. There we go.
Drink that for.
Thank you.
You bet.
Sorry.
You ready to ride now?
I think we're going to stop there. I don't think I want to attempt to try to do that in 2 minutes.
A lot of info in this.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes. So, and it's a word.